Hello, everybody. It's Michael Jaco with Unleashing Intuition Secrets, joined once again by Mitch Wexler, and he has really taken things to another level with the fraud of our taxes and so forth, property taxes, how they've been manipulated in Texas, where he has a very good case against the all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court. And going all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. So this is incredible. We're going to be talking about that. So Mitch, thanks so much for joining us once again.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to help bring people up to speed as to what's happening. And the only word I can think of is egregious action by the Supreme Court of Texas. But more than likely, it's going to get undone for a variety of reasons that we'll touch on today. But their actions are such that they created deprivation of rights, which is a federal crime against not just Wexler, but against all Texans. And they denied a case to be heard, not just under Texas constitutional law, but under the constitutional law of the United States of America. So in essence, the question that's being presented to the Supreme Court of the United States is whether a state, and I'll touch on that in a second, a state may do an end run around its own constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America. And why is this so important? Because what the Supreme Court of Texas has done is they created a replicable template for other states to follow. So not only have the deprivation of rights been committed against 32 million Texans, but in reality, if other states follow the Supreme Court of Texas, you can kiss the Constitution of the United States of America goodbye, because they would have effectively done an end run around it. And that's why this isn't going to stand.
Yeah, so it's when you break it down, you found the fraud, because you're dealing in real estate, you're buying and selling and so forth, and you're seeing the property taxes are going up way more than it should be, way more, because of the rate of inflation is a certain percentage, but the rate of the property taxes going up was ridiculously much higher. And so you started doing the research, and you see that these property taxes are, we give them, we trust them. We've given them the trust to, do these property taxes and appraise property. And you found that they were appraising these properties illegally in some cases, well, all of the cases really, to a point where they just shut everything down and just started putting in numbers on their own.
So if you go back 5 years and you use the average value of a house of $220,000, by virtue of inflation, that $220,000, give or take, legitimately would turn somewhere around $272,000 today. That's not what happened, according to the central appraisal districts. What happened was that $220,000 house became worth $440,000. And through that process of the overvaluation, which is fraud, then the net result to the school districts from which bonds are raised is that they stole, this is the fraudulent component, not the total tax, just the fraudulent component, $17,700 from the average property owner who had a $220,000 home. They did that in the last 5 years. Now, multiply that by roughly 149 million homes. The damage, 2.6 trillion. Hard cash, stolen, pure fraud, and it's irrefutable. The math is the math. No judge on this planet can change the arithmetic. And no judge can explain the economic damages done through these bonds, because no judge can trace it, because the courts are prohibiting tracing the QSIPs. How much money was actually raised? We've calculated it. We did it through a backdoor method of roughly $5.1 trillion. Now, I know it's more than that, because they have 313 agreements, they have energy contracts, they have off-balance sheet financing. I've seen all that, but I can't quantify it. What I could quantify is looking at the median home income figuring out what the values were and then backing in to the multiples of how much money was raised by the school districts with regard to the fraudulent school district bonds, roughly 5.1 trillion.
Wow. Wow. Incredible. Now, I've seen a couple of presentations now at the Fraud Fighter Summits, and the last one you did was incredible. I mean, you exposed that it's not just the bond fraud in the property tax area. It's also the it spills right over into election fraud and the fraud in so many other areas. So they use the same process. Is that correct?
It's not the same process, but what had happened through a video that I did, Edward Solomon reached out through Mark Cook. So Mark Cook called me and said, Ed Solomon would like to have a conversation with you. And I said, okay. So what Ed saw in me, which wasn't really articulated at that time, he went into the math, but the nexus between the two cases, his case against the manufacturer of the voting machines themselves. So Ed was an expert witness, or to be an expert witness. What he saw was correct, which is there's two parallel cases, two different issues, having the exact same problem, which is the inability or the prohibition of having a case adjudicated. Edward Solomon, as the expert witness, was never allowed to walk into a courtroom. They knew if he walked in, they lose. It's that simple. He's got the math. I've got their spreadsheets. So it's Ed Solomon, Roger Fuller, and as a different mathematician, Dr. Andrew Paquette. They had come to the same conclusion about the election fraud software and how it's done. Mm-hmm. Well, what's the nexus to the real estate tax? Real estate taxes and the fraudulent component of those taxes is money spent at the school districts to cover off fraudulent bonds. The problem is that that money to cover off those fraudulent bonds, A, doesn't exist under the median household income. B, the bonds themselves, as I proved at the Fraud Fighter Summit, there never was, and I mean never, a legitimate reason for any school district to go and raise bonds. It is a mechanism to strip mom and pop's equity out of their house. That is clearly what I laid out. Well, it turns out that an analysis was done on Bexar County, Texas, and Harris County, Texas. And what did they find in the school districts? The exact same flip function inside the voting software that took place. In other words, there are people who are sitting on these school district boards that were put there by virtue of fraud inside the software. Mm. So it's a cacophony of fraud everywhere. And that's what we called out. And it's a horrible situation. But the bottom line is there is no election that could be even deemed legitimate, but for a punch bowl and paper ballots and voter ID. If it touches software, it's automatically suspect. Wow. And we have the math to back that statement up. These voter machines must be destroyed. The software must be destroyed and never allowed to be used again in history. This stuff is poison, and we've proven it. You saw Ed Solomon on stage. You saw Roger Fuller on stage. What they have come across and the method of the hidden vote distortion logic is not up for debate. It's real. You can say, well, I disagree with it. Go ahead. Disprove it. And therein lies the problem. I laid down that gauntlet. Nobody in all these hearings, all these rehearings, have been able to prove that we're wrong on anything. So I laid down the gauntlet. FBI, DOJ, SEC, IRS. If you think we're wrong on something, for crying out loud, say it. We'll remove it. The problem is there's another 1,100 documents in behind it. The point being, if you can't disprove it, then it occurred. And if it occurred, those people who are stopping adjudication of proven fraud are guilty. And therein is the reason why we're having problems of being heard. There are people who have been put in office that aren't supposed to be there. And we've got the math through the cast vote records to back that up. In fact, on the Second Amendment to the criminal complaint is a photographic evidence that for those who go to a voting booth and you see a touch screen, we have the photographic evidence that the barcodes on the touch screen have the flip function built into each one of those little black lines. These elections are predetermined, and therein is the huge problem. So not only is your money being equity stripped out of your house, your vote may not be what you think your vote is. And the only way to fix it is to destroy, and I mean destroy, the voting machines, the voting software, and put those who are responsible for prior elections in jail. It's on both sides of the aisle.
That sounds good to me. I like the way you're thinking. And a lot of people are like, well, let's just stop paying property taxes. But you have made a case that that's not the way this works. And you know, in the military, I learned very early on, if you have a bitch, you better have a solution. So you've been pointing out fraud, but you also have a solution. You could take away the fraud and then start to put out not a property tax, but a tax, a county tax, which would cover within 2 to 3 years all of the issues that needed to be covered, and then you know you can reassess at that point. Is that kind of correct?
So in the case of Texas, now this is not applicable in particular to Montana, which could do this at a 9% sales tax rate effective today.
Wow.
But in the case of Texas, because of what I had mentioned before with regard to the 313 agreements, the off-balance sheet financing, all this other kabuki theater having to do where money is put into economic development commissions, as an example. The way to get around this is you say, fine, for 3 years, the sales tax total in the state of Texas will go to 15%. Upon stabilization, after the school districts take bankruptcy, it'll drop to about 11%. Texas is probably the worst out of the worst. Ohio is bad, but in terms of sales tax, Texas is probably at the top of the list. So that's about as bad as it's going to get, but it's a very short-term basis. So then the next question would be, why the sales tax? Because the infrastructure exists and it's immediate, right? If you go to a grocery store, you buy a chocolate bar, you're going to pay 15% and that's the end of it. You buy a 2x4 at Home Depot, 15% tax. It's immediate, the infrastructure exists, and municipal items, fire departments, police departments, what have you, and even schools have to have their true operating expenses covered. They have to submit a legitimate budget, not based on raising bonds, a legitimate budget, and that is what that tax covers and should cover. No problem. The issue that we're speaking about is the fraud, because what they've done is they took from the school districts and they created bonds. So they take the money from mom and pop. But you have to realize that what you would normally get in your amortization schedule on your house, when you pay off your mortgage, that's your amortization. When they raise the taxes on an annual basis, de facto, they are equity stripping your amortization. You will never own that house. You would just keep paying in perpetuity. So what do we have? Well, we have a sales tax that kills off all real estate tax, restoring true property ownership. No longer will any real estate tax or property tax be in existence. You bought it, you own it, never to be taxed again.
Wow. Good. That's incredible. And now I'm gonna put on the screen the letter. I guess you've got some. Peter Tickton is involved in this. Peter Tickton, for those of you, I did a show with Peter Tickton. He was with President Trump when they were going to school together, military academy. So they've known each other for a long time. Peter Tickton was involved with, freeing Tina Peters. Obviously, that took some time, but he was, directly involved in that. And now he saw Mitch's presentation, and he was like, he wanted to talk to you right away. So that's great. So tell us a little bit about what happened.
It went through a series of meetings. So I spent probably 6-7 hours with Mr. Tickton over those 2 days. And David Kenny was also there. So these two gentlemen are both attorneys, both of which happen to be licensed to appear in front of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Wow.
So the way to get this done is to get the attention of Solicitor General Sauer, which is what it is that you're looking at in front of you, because he is the back door to the Supreme Court of the United States, and he can insist, as can the president, that the Supreme Court of the United States should hear this case. This is not just a Texas case. This is now a national problem, because if other states copy what the Supreme Court of Texas did, constitutional rights no longer exist. Cannot stand under any circumstance. So temporarily,
tell us how they did that. They took our constitutional rights and basically built a box around them, so that if you tried to come in and protest, hey, I need judicial clarity on this. I need the judicial system to look at this. This seems fraudulent to me. You wouldn't even be able to do that.
Exactly. And that's the problem. So there are laws against this. 18 U.S. Code Section 242. It's a crime. Literally, it's a crime, federal crime, for any person acting under the color of law to willfully deprive someone of their rights protected by the Constitution or the U.S. laws, including states' constitutions. It is an undeniable fact that my rights and the rights of every Texan have been denied as adjudication of known proven fraud has been prohibited. One word, denied. Well, other states can do the same thing, and using the way you just said it, yeah, they built a box around it. You can't touch us. We're a court, except for one problem. 18 U.S. Code 242 wouldn't exist if a crime was never being committed. And then U.S. Code 42, Section 1983, individuals can sue. Mom and pop can sue these people, including the judges, for deprivation of federal rights committed under the color of law. They can't hide from this. And it goes one step up in that a contract that is designed to break the law isn't a contract in the eyes of the law. No court has any capacity whatsoever to make a determination that, oh, no, you don't get to go into court. That's not the job of a judge. Adjudication is the job. Prohibition of adjudication is not. And that is what the Supreme Court of Texas did. And what makes it national now in scope is that other states may very well try to follow suit. This has to be shut down.
That's incredible. So what we're seeing right now, and similarly, not exactly the same, but similarly, Nick Shirley in California Senate committee, they're holding a hearing to stop Nick Shirley Act. This bill will criminalize and punish anyone from looking into fraud inside immigrant communities in California. So they started this bill because he was starting to expose fraud in the billions of dollars. And so they're creating a bill, kind of like what we're talking about right now, which would prohibit anyone from looking at their fraud. It's unbelievable, but this is what we're talking about here. It's widespread. So this would set a precedence potentially, which would collapse all of these systems of fraud and control around the country. Is that correct?
They're going to collapse one way or the other. The only question is, do you have controlled demolition, which is the preference, or do they keep pushing this can to the point where it just simply blows up? And when I mean blows up, you're going to walk into the market one day and it'll be down 2,000 or 3,000 points, because all credibility on behalf of the U.S. government will be shot. If you have the ability to say, okay, fine, we recognize the fraud, we know where it is, we know who did it, we know how it was done, the $5.1 trillion in outstanding fraudulent school district bond debt, why would you not go after that in order to rescue the big kahuna? The big kahuna are the U.S. treasuries, 2s, 5s, 7s, 10s, and 30s. Without credibility of the U.S. government, they will disintegrate. Now, are they 30 cents on the dollar, 40 cents on the dollar? I don't know. don't care. I don't have any of them. But a lot of people do. So this is really an issue about credibility, including that what you just mentioned at the state of California. But to be crystal clear, the federal predicate is deprivation of rights under color of law. Well, that's exactly what's happening in California, and that's exactly what has happened with the Supreme Court here in Texas. It's a federal crime. But here's the problem on the Texas side, which may grow exponentially. That deprivation of rights, you must understand that that is a guarantee of taxation without representation. Representation means law. Taxation without law. 250 years ago, the War of Independence and the founding of the United States of America was over that issue. No taxation without representation. It's back. And because this is so egregious, and I know that attorneys, well, we have to talk nice to judges, et cetera, under normal circumstances, I get it. But the bottom line here, there's nothing nice about this. It's basically the Supreme Court of Texas has stripped the constitutional rights of all citizens. The same grievance that founded the United States of America is back. The Supreme Court of Texas is supporting fraud. They don't want this case adjudicated. Well, too bad, because in exchange for you not wanting this case adjudicated and keeping me out of a courtroom, and keeping all Texans for that matter out of a courtroom, what should happen? The entirety of the bench, the Supreme Court of Texas, should be impeached. That's how bad and how egregious this is. This is no joke. The United States of America is a republic. It has a constitution. This is what separates us from everybody else on the planet. Under no circumstance should that even be questionable. And yet, here we are.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, one of the slides, and you shared this with me, that you put out in your recent briefing. So you said this is not a theoretical case. 42 million American households are one $9,000 emergency away from losing their homes. Roughly 7,000 of those dollars are property tax. Wow. So this is something everybody needs to really stand up and take notice of.
The actions of the Supreme Court of Texas, and I changed the title on my document a couple of days before I gave that presentation, and it's foretelling. What has happened here is foretelling of an act of war. Why? Because history says so. Our country was founded on this one issue: no taxation without representation. We have law. We know that. We have facts. We know that. We have the math. We most certainly know that. What do they have? They have the crimes. And the Supreme Court of Texas has chosen, not once, but twice, to protect the crimes.
Wow.
They're protecting the fraud. Therein lies the problem. If other states move to copy, it's a national issue.
Yeah. So it is back on the 250th anniversary of the founding of our republic. This, taxation without representation, and that's what we're seeing in Texas and across the country, probably in every county. You've looked at this is going on pretty much in every county. What do we have? How many counties do we have in America? 1,000, 3,000?
3,147, I believe.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, we have not seen, let's put it this way, if a school district is involved and the school district is raising bonds, we have not seen a single county that is being held accountable for the fraud that they have created. And there's a slide in that deck, I believe it's slide 8, called the infection rate spreadsheet. And in that infection rate spreadsheet, I have proven irrefutably that there's not a single central appraisal district that is part of a school district that, in fact, is legitimate. They cannot adhere to uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. They are in breach. Why? Because just like COVID, infections will continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So one little bad number, one little bad property comparison turns into tens, turns into hundreds, turns into thousands, and it moves very quickly. In fact, in the Denton Central Appraisal District, I proved that in a 60-day cycle, 50% of the database was irretrievably corrupted. I took it out 3 years past that, and 100% of the database was irretrievably corrupted. The bottom line is, if it touches bonds, it's corrupted. The CAD is utter garbage. Their databases literally are not worth 10 cents. Crimes are being committed. The pattern and practice of how this is done is clear. The pattern and practice of who did it, right? Because you have chief appraisers and you have school district superintendents who are committing bond fraud and accounting fraud. So who did it, how it was done, when it was done, because it appears in the QSIPs, it's all trackable. The problem is we don't have the subpoena power that the SEC does. The SEC can walk into these school districts and say, turn over those QSIPs and the amortization schedule. You got 5 minutes. If you don't, we'll arrest you. They have that type of power. They need to use it. But the bottom line is the crimes have been committed.
Yeah, so they're so they're up against the wall now. And when does this case go before I guess the Supreme Court of Texas?
So the Supreme Court of Texas is done. That case was finalized on May 7th, I believe, May 7th or May 8th. So we have till August 6th to get a writ of certiorari into the Supreme Court of the United States. Wow. And that's what I'm working on with Peter Tickton right now and David Kenny and ideally Solicitor General Sauer immediately to get this into gear, to get it submitted. And ideally, because it's an emergency basis, it could be heard within 60 to 90 days. But this case better be heard or the United States of America is in big trouble.
So what kind of time frame do you see? Because you think about the debt would probably be exposed to the point where it would crash the stock market 2,000 or 3,000 points in one day. What kind of time frame do you see happening for that potential to happen?
Nobody knows the exact answer. The problem is that 42 million households, that's a huge problem. The outstanding fraudulent school district bond debt, that liability has got to come off these houses very quickly. There is no money. The median household income existing today cannot pay the interest on the outstanding bonds, 5.1 trillion, never mind paying them off. And I want to point something out. In Godly, Texas, right now today, roughly $120,000 is outstanding in school district bond debt per house. The average house in Godly is 160 grand. In 30 years from now, that 120,000 goes up 580%. Well, you have the exact same problem on the 5.1 trillion. In 30 years from now, it turns into 29 trillion. It's mathematically impossible to pay off. So the only question, and to your point, when does the market start to freak out? When they realize the truth. What I'm trying to do is push the government to recognize the truth and deal with this so we have controlled demolition. Why? Because yes, it's true that some people in their portfolios hold municipal bonds, and a portion of those municipal bonds are school district bonds. But on an individual basis, that's extremely small. 5.1 trillion is a lot of money, but on an individual basis, it's manageable. The problem is if you don't get rid of it, what in essence on a let's call it $120,000 worth of debt, that's roughly $592 a month per household to pay for that in Godly, Texas. But in 30 years, that turns into over $3,400 a month. There is no way that this is going to get paid off. Best to deal with it rather than let it blow. But the direct answer to your question is it could be 6 months, it could be 8 months. When the market wakes up and says, yeah, we're not playing this game anymore, we're out, you'll know.
Yeah. So, you know, the fraud has been going on for quite some time. When exactly did they start doing school bonds? There was like in the 70s or something?
Well, yes. So it goes back depending on where, what community you're looking at. However, the bonds then weren't the problem. Not good. It was a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
But the math of the bonds, the rule of 72 kicks in. And when that occurs, you end up in a problem. So around 2000, 2001 is when the interest on the bonds jumped the principal. When that happened, it's been downhill ever since. So the bonds get bigger, and then you have the compound cumulative effect of the interest on top of the bonds, from which they have to go out and raise more bonds to pay for that interest. So you've got a circular argument, in reality, straight into hell. This cannot ever be paid off. It's mathematically impossible. The income does not exist.
Wow, incredible. So because it's been going on for so long, they've been stealing for so long, we've seen a lot of people losing their houses because of the property taxes. In your estimation, I mean, it's a real stretch to kind of figure out what those numbers are, but what would you say percentage-wise across the United States, and some areas are going to be more than others, of course, of people that are losing their homes through this fraud?
It's everywhere, but the answer is tens of thousands so far this year alone. Wow. So in Texas, you've got over 4.2 million. It's coincidental on the number, but it's over 4.2 million households cannot afford the roof over their head. That money just doesn't exist to pay the taxes. And it's even tied to hunger. So back in December, I did a story about hunger, and I tied that back to the real estate taxes. You get rid of these taxes, you can feed people who are hungry, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are in the chat are saying, you know, their property taxes, we have Texans in here too, are super suspect. I mean, they've been exploding upwards like you've been talking about. You know, so people are aware of this before we even had this discussion. And there's, like we're talking about, there's no recourse. They protected themselves legally from, exposing the fraud and saying, you know, how is our property tax going up so much? Now we're seeing properties are losing value. I've seen, like in just this one Reventure Consulting, this gentleman that comes up, he was in Atlanta, Georgia, and there's like 50% decrease in property, values. So how is that going to start to impact on this? So you would think that they're having to constantly inflate these numbers, and now we're going to start to have real property values go down significantly. How that could accelerate the collapse, couldn't it?
Technically speaking, you should end up in a 50 to 60% devaluation from the high of what the CAD was saying with regard to value. In other words, the reversion to the mean, but for the fraud, is the bogey. If the fraud didn't exist, this money that I mentioned from the $220,000 home at $17,000 being stolen the last 5 years, that never would have happened. But I'm going to give you the cheat code. So they're going to lie, and they're going to say, well, we need to change the mill rate. We have to up our tax rate because the values are going down, so we'll change the mill rate. This is a crime. This is utter nonsense. And why is it a crime? Because that's not how Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice works, which is the law, which is required in all states, which also is being ignored. And therein is the problem. There's no doubt, zero, that these people, these chief appraisers, the school district superintendents, are colluding. It's called conspiracy to defraud. They're caught. There is no way out. And what the judges are doing by backstopping them temporarily is just that. It's a temporary fix. Best the government get involved, or you're likely to end up in a kinetic war, civil war. You can't steal from people and think you're not going to be held accountable.
Yeah, civil war against the institutions that are doing the fraud, which was, like we talked about, judicial and these appraisers and so forth. So it's not a big civil war. It's like there's just a few individuals that are going to be held accountable. And civil war because, you know, we're not getting any representation. So people turn into vigilante almost and start and go into the civil war type of environment where they strike back. We don't want that, obviously. So you are bringing justice so that we don't have to, you know, go to that extreme. And I think that's going to be extremely valuable. And that's why it goes to the Supreme Court. Now, we've seen the Supreme Court has not, you know, done some good things, you know, lately. What are your thoughts on would they rule rightly in this case? I think so. But what are your thoughts?
I don't think they have any choice in the matter. And it's not even a question of I don't think. I know, factually speaking, they do not have any choice in the matter.
Wow.
This is so crazy to deny the rights of a citizen, the existence of the Constitution of the United States of America is beyond insane. But nonetheless, this is what they have done. The fear being that other states will follow. If other states follow, those states, and in truth, the Supreme Court would make everything illegal. There would be no law.
Wow. So the overvaluation, overtaxation, I'm reading from this one letter. Overvaluation, overtaxation in order to carry the interest on debts that are not properly tracked. So they've you know, done these, like you say in one of your slides, these workarounds, which is not, there's no legal word for workaround, but they've actually said that. So there's so many different things that they're being exposed for. Like you say, the Supreme Court is like, they're going to look at this like there's no other, they're going to rule against this.
Well, let me try to bring this down real quick, just to help everybody understand how egregious this is. What is the Supreme Court of Texas hiding? Well, one of the documents is something called unlimited tax. I defy anybody that's watching this video to define what an unlimited tax is. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as unlimited tax. You don't have unlimited money. Nobody does. Not even Elon Musk. Therefore, if there's no such thing as an unlimited tax, or if there's no such thing, then the question becomes, why is that being sold to the public? That's the text that is used to raise the bonds. All nonsense.
Yeah.
You can bring the whole house of cards down with 2 words.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And so I know you've had, you know, after our fraud event, you had some throat issues and you're still recovering from that. So I don't want to keep you too much longer. Thank you so much for coming on, because I know you're fighting through that and you wanted to get on and share this information. So we really appreciate that. What are the final things we would like to end with, so we can focus on something going forward, some kind of recourse maybe that we're going to see? What are your thoughts?
Getting the attention of Solicitor General Sauer right now, top priority. This has to happen because he is the back door to the Supreme Court of the United States. Get me in front of the judges. I'll take care of the rest of it. That's what it comes down to. This case needs to be remanded and tried on its merits. That's all we're asking for. But continuing to hide the fraud is not going to fly.
Very good. Very good. And it's not going to fly much longer, because everybody's piling in now. So you got the top guys that are, you know, Peter Tickton. I mean, he's like a pit bull. You get him involved and it's pretty much game over. At some point they have to like give up, and that's where we're at right now. So Mitch, thanks so much. Now, how can people reach you if they want to?
So my website is mockingbirdproperties.com/DCAD. And the current information is all up top with regard to the couple of presentations that I'm giving, including some of these slides. So it's all there, and probably within 3 days, the document that I just sent to Michael will actually be posted, and that is the letter that went to Solicitor General Sauer and Peter Tickton and David Kenny. Wow. Discussing it, and I've shared everything with the public since day one. As fast as we draft it, it's out there. We're doing that on purpose, especially now, because we need Solicitor General Sauer to step up and do his job.
So he's up against the wall. So he's got nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The information's there. So we're going to see some resolution here pretty soon. And I definitely look forward to having you back on, and we're talk about that. So fantastic as always, Mitch. Again, thanks for coming on. You've had issues with your throat, so prayers for you to get well soon, and we'll look forward to this resolution coming. So keep us informed, and we'll have you back on, and we'll talk about it. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to help update people.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sure everybody, we say lots of love, and we're sending you lots of love and success in this. So appreciate all your efforts and what you've done to expose all this. Thank you.
Thank you.